welcome to this edition of the Political Rumbles this evening. Yes, trust you are getting on well. How are you doing and the family? Of course, the loved ones. In the spirit of the Unitide, I welcome you all to this exciting moment, especially we have an important issue to discuss here. It's all about, of course, the positions of some eminent Nigerians who have spoken or who has been outspoken before, but suddenly what happened? They decided to go back to their sheets. Uh, could it be a state of compromise, or could it be a silence, of course, of the dead? Or could it be that the outspokenness would be as a result of some sort of interest, vested interest, and was such interest well protected? They decided to go back to their sheet. I mean, nobody's hearing their voices again on the pages of newspapers and granting medias and briefings. It's no longer tenable. What suddenly happened is something very important because we have uh, this subject of interest. The personality is no other person but the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, who made a statement that it is mad to think Nigeria will work under this current configuration. Suddenly went hiding, went silent, and is no longer granting the media briefings on the state of the nations. Of most recent, Wole Soyinka said that he will only, of course, assess uh, Ahmed Bola Tinubu, the president of Nigeria, after 12 calendar months. He will remain speechless. He will not, of course, either criticize the government until after 1 year. This is a man who has been dominated, of course, in the media. During Jonathan time, you see the level of criticism, driven by some strong, of course, reservation of about Jonathan's person. He condemned Jonathan with all sense of commitment and claiming that Nigeria cannot be run in such a state where there is endemic corruption. And the question is now, what suddenly happened? Are we in the state of the right mind? What suddenly happened that some eminent Nigerians decide, of course, to go back to their sheet and remain silent over the issues, the nagging issues, hitting, of course, overheating the politics. One of these issues are what we are going to raise this evening. And I welcome you to this exciting moment. It's an interactive moment. You will, okay, let's know what is your own position regarding these topical issues. The state of Nigeria is today, Nigeria is as stable as whatever you can imagine in terms of security, in terms of economy, in terms of, the living standards of average Nigerians. It's nothing to write home about, and things are getting worse than even when the criticism was at the peak. Things were not just the same. There had not been any improvement, but abysmal decline ever since then. But yet, suddenly, there appeared to be some level of silence, indifference, and, of course, conspiracy, if I may say, because the same man who was canvassing and advocating for good governance, accountability, of course, to Nigerians, suddenly went underground. And he has been a critic, of course, of most recent of the obedience movement, calling them fascist and the fascist movement and all that. You can imagine. But yet, since Tinubu assumes office as the president of Nigeria, after the removal of subsidy, even before getting to the Oval Office, Nigerians have been passing through very serious economic challenges, which has cost the life of many families, and the many families have been, of course, devastated. Many Nigerians have lost their jobs. Many have been retrenched. Of course, of most recent, you see the GSK, the P&G, of course, multinational companies leaving the shores of Nigeria because Nigerian states has been considered to be, of course, not good for the business. The sustainability of doing business or the ease of doing business in Nigeria is very destructive. It's not encouraging, and considering the, of course, inflation rate, which eventually make it impossible for the investors or manufacturers to procure their raw materials, of course, at very exorbitant cost, which at the, in the long run will, of course, leave the company battling, of course, to meet its cost of running the business without profit. Let's hear what Professor Soyinka said on the 7th of March 2021 regarding the state of affairs of Nigeria during the Buhari administration, or will I use the word regime? Because there's no difference between the 1984-85 Buhari than what was played out in the last 8 years before Ahmed Bola Tinubu assumes office as a substantive 16th president of Nigeria. This is what he has to say. Nobel, Nobel laureate Prof. Wole Soyinka on Saturday restated, that is referring to the 7th of March 2021, restated his position on restructuring Nigeria, stating that the country cannot work under the current system of government. So why the sudden change? Have there been a new change of system of governments? Have they entrenched this aspect of restructuring, balance in the system? So why suddenly, of course, Professor Wole Soyinka went blanked, went silent on the ground without speaking up? Has such restructuring been attained? Has that been adopted or implemented by the government of the day? What suddenly happened that led to this suspicious silence by the Nobel laureate, who has been outspoken before this time, granting several interviews? In fact, just to say the least, during 2024, he was at the front burner, of course, at the lead of a protest that Jonathan must go, that Jonathan must go, that Jonathan is incapacitated, that Jonathan has nothing to offer the country, that Jonathan intends to impoverish Nigeria by his anti-policies and abuse of office and the rascality of the highest order and all those endless rhetorics. But what suddenly happened today? Can you now say that the Jonathan era is more worthwhile than this dispensation of government? So why the sudden silence on the part of Wole Soyinka? Does it mean that this government has surpassed that of Jonathan in terms of developmental side, in terms of improving the living standards of the Nigerian people? I mean, what this was a serious concern. For the past 8 months or so, Olashoyinka have been silent. In fact, his body language supposes or suggests that he is in line. He has aligned himself with this government even before inception, before the government was even established. Suddenly he went silent, and nobody is hearing his criticism, only telling the gullible ones that he reserved his assessment of Ahmed Bola Tinubu, the president of Nigeria, until when he marks 1 year in office, that 365 days in office. Well, Wole Soyinka, who emphasized decentralization of power and governance, cited the current security challenges as one of the reasons Nigeria needed to be restructured. These are one of the, of course, factors he cited, leading to the need, and not urgent need, for the restructuring of Nigeria to decentralize power so that states can control their own security architecture and, of course, protect the locals as their needs might be peculiar or localized. But has such issues been addressed? So why the silence? Why waiting for 1 year before you start assessing or adjudging the government, which people has suffered so much within the few months in office? That is, of course, quite sad and unfortunate. And this is just a sad story about some prominent Nigerians who, unfortunately, seems to be biased, compromised in their in taking positions regarding the issues uh, bordering on the Nigerian state and the continuity of the country. It is quite sad, but then these are the realities. Okay, according to him, let me just go down. There is a consensus that this country, whether in terms of governance, economic relations, security, education policy, cultural policy, etc., requires restructuring. Even the word restructuring has been restructured in many directions. That is his submissions in cogent expression, which means the same thing for everybody. I beg to disagree with his position. If it means the same thing for everybody, then what is your stance? Why the sudden silence? Has the restructuring economic wise, the imbalance in the system of governance, the disparity, the dichotomy, the injustice, the suppression and marginalization of some regions, has that been addressed? No, that question, of course, is going to Wole Soyinka with due respect. Let him tell Nigerians why he suddenly went underground. Why he suddenly, this is a man who went on the protest in 2024 and 2014 when Jonathan attempted to remove subsidy. The same Wole Soyinka, Bakare, and Tinubu and his cronies, they went and, of course, staged a protest for weeks at Ojota here in Lagos State, demanding that Jonathan must go, that the Jonathan government must be brought to an end, that Jonathan government is this and that. This man criticized Buhari, but passively. But what? Why is he not speaking up over the anti-policies of this government that have worsened the living standard of Nigerians? Somebody, of course, a bag of rice is about 75,000 or so now. Was it the same way in 2014 during Jonathan time when this man was criticizing Jonathan? By then, a bag of rice was about 6,005. Yes, 6,005. I bought a bag of rice 6,005 to 7,000. Now that it had become 75,000, and there was this dead silence. The people who are known to be critics are no longer speaking up. What really happens? I think this question should be directed to Wole Soyinka and his likes, who suddenly went silent over nagging issues that have not been addressed, that is seeking for urgent attention, bordering on economy, security, and of course, governance, uh, imbalance in the system, which has deepened. The rottenness has deepened, the decay has deepened. He also went further to say the reason why Nigeria should be restructured because of the endemic corruption. Yes, Jonathan time there was corruption, I quite agree. There was mismanagement of public funds. In fact, Jonathan was so loose that he could not, I mean, check the SSCs of those uh, appointees under his government. Yes, they looted the country to stupor, but that was a far cry to what Buhari did. You see, Jonathan's corruption multiplied. In fact, Jonathan did his best to fight corruption through, of course, uh, deploying digital means of curtailing those excesses. But during Buhari time, in fact, Buhari gave birth to corruption. You see, and this dispensation impregnated the corruption that Buhari gave birth to. So you know what? Multiple replication of the same system that have failed. So why is Wole Soyinka not speaking up? Please, I may want to know what is your stance on your positions here. I'm just reading out before we go into details of our discussion this evening. It is important we begin to ask questions. Why suddenly most of these people are not speaking up again? Why? During the military junta of Bacha and the likes, I know the role Wole Soyinka played in condemning the government. I know the military junta government is not good for Nigeria because the democratic process is being truncated, that the rights of the citizens are being, of course, violated, and all that, and all that. People are suffering. The living conditions of Nigerians are nothing to write home about. Now, what happened in the so-called democratic process? Government had Nigerian population felt better than the days of Abacha? Well, that is the question. Then, if you condemn the military government, then, and now under your watch, impunity, atrocity of the highest order is being displayed. The high level of rascality, impunity, injustice, abuse of office, abuse of power, the enfranchisement of the Nigerian population, even during the elections. Wole Soyinka never came out to condemn such level of rascality, such level of injustice meted on Nigerians, where Nigerians were forced not to go to the polls to decide who becomes the elective president or whatever. I expected him to have condemned such so many dastard acts from different quarters of the country, but he never did that. Could it be said that his silence at this time is a conspiracy against the masses, conspiring with the, of course, political elites within the southern region, of course, to hold the country to ransom? Why is it that Wole Soyinka is no longer calling for restructuring and the decentralization and complete configuration of the Nigerian states? This is a very important issue that must be raised at this time. That should be a topical issues. And then when such people speaks, you don't take them serious because you begin to, I mean, try to fathom what could have informed their positions in the first place. Was it born out of zeal? I mean, to chart a new way forward for humanity, or was it driven by some interest, vested interest? Of course, is the story is becoming very clear. As some say, seven up is a seven up is clear. The difference is clear. We are seeing now that these people could they be trusted? Could you bank on their words? Of course, for me, he said, for instance, I emphasize decentralization reconfiguration. We all know that we have not, that, okay, what we have is not working. What do you have you think is not working? And what suddenly happens that you think it can work now? Why the silence? It is obvious we can't continue along the same line and say that it will work. It is it is sign of madness. That is his submission. He said it is obvious with all sense of responsibility that we can't continue along the same line and say that it will work. It will work. This is what Wole Soyinka said. It is sign of madness when you begin to think that you will continue along the same line or thought pattern or way of doing things and expect a change, then it will be a sign of madness. This is what he said. Now, if was your position, you suddenly went silent and could not sustain the tempo, then what does that tell about his person? Well, I'm not here to, of course, uh, to ridicule any person, but we're here to educate ourselves and, of course, have an insight over what is happening. And could such society move forward when you only criticize people when they are not from your own tribe, when they do not represent your interests, but when suddenly they become part of you, when they are from your own tribe, despite the level of your exposure, academic attainment, you tend to align in that direction, in that primitive or parochial sentiments, you still share them. And how could Nigeria move forward with such level of uh, character displayed by those who should have set, of course, an impeccable character, an impeccable action, or impeccable uh, direction that everybody will look up to and say, of a truth, this man is a patriotic nationalist. It's not driven by parochial or tribal sentiments. But the reverse seems to be the case because what is happening now, you are telling Nigerians that they should wait to hear your own after 1 year. See, after 1 year, what is the need of doing that? You are not calling for the restructuring, for the decentralization of the government, devolving power to uh, the regions and of course the states, so that jobs can be created. There could be sense of responsibility and commitment, of course, taken down to the grassroots, so that the people within the grassroots can monitor those representing them, those, of course, saddled with the responsibility of governance, so that they could hold them accountable on daily basis. You went silent, you went underground, and the same man called uh, Gregory Pitobi the presidential candidate of Labour Party. So many names that they are trying to incite the country to cause problem, to do this. They are fascist. They are this and that. You begin to see directly from his statements and body language that he is clearly against a particular race, a particular people, because of his vested interests. Do you call such person as a nationalist or a sectional personality or leader? It is quite sad, and this is the position. You see, he also called on the National Assembly to listen to the call for the restructuring of Nigeria, while lamenting that the state of corruption in the country is alarming. That was 2021. That the state of corruption in Nigeria is alarming. is endemic. Now, what happens today? So why do you went suddenly underground? Whether he believes it or not, sometimes people say what they don't believe. But let me take him by his word, which he says, and let me quote it. He said, "It is obvious," and I quote, "It is obvious, and we can't continue along the same line and say that it will work." Whether he meant what he said or it was just a mere political, of course, as jargon, just to dismiss his audience. But I do agree with that we can continue. It is obvious. It is quite obvious. It is more obvious than ever imagined before in the history of Nigeria. It is more obvious, more certain, very clear, without any ambiguity, of course, that we can't continue along the same line and say that it will work. Why Nigeria is not working today is because there is no sense of responsibility, there is no sincerity, even among the political elites, political class, and among the elites, because they are only, of course, after their selfish interests or whatever they stand to gain. They are not driven by the passion and to build an egalitarian society where everybody will feel, of course, belong and having been integrated into the Nigerian project. Honestly, that is quite sad. It is quite sad with all the accusations, allegations, directly fighting the obedient movement, trying to silence them from expressing their own opinions as recognized and protected by the law. You're trying to make them as look like they are law breakers, they are not law abiding. But that is quite sad. That is a lie from the pit of hell. Of course, they have demonstrated that they are more uh, reserved, they're more, of course, they have more character and could, of course, maintain their composure regardless of what they feel about the election. But the truth it remains, whether we tend to deny it or not, that it is obvious that we can't continue along the same line and expect it to work. It can never work. And the truth that it has never worked. It has never worked. And when you continue along the same line, expecting a different result, it cannot work. So if it cannot work, so who do you blame? If it cannot work, who do you blame? Who should you hold responsible? And will you at this time condemn those who may want to, of course, seek a better way of expression, a better way of identifying and living out their lives by way of seeking for secession or self-determination of the Biafran state and every other state or regions that may want to, of course, pull out from the country because it is not working. And it is mad to think it will work with the same system of government, with the same line of actions. I mean, Nigeria keep on borrowing in the midst of plenty, in the midst of relative abundance. That is a sign of weakness, a sign of failure on the part of the political class or the ruling class. You have enormous material, raw materials, I mean, in relative abundance. You also have the human factor, resources, humans, the youths at their productive age. They want to be meaningfully engaged, but they don't see anything that can engage them. The same strength they use in indulging themselves in vices. I was discussing with someone this early this today. He was saying that those days during his secondary school, you can count. I mean, you can't even count the number of textile factories, industries in Lagos. But how many are there now? How many is still functional? They've all closed down. They have shut down. And how do you expect to create jobs for the masses? Virtually all the industries, even multinationals, are pulling out of the country. Needless, needless to just talk about the Dunlop and other this thing of Moses and GSK, which has affected the cost of drugs, medicine today. A medicine that was once bought at just 1.8 is now about 25,000. One that was bought, I mean, it is getting out of the reach of Nigerians. And what does that mean? Of course, to an average Nigerian who could not afford medical care or medical insurance scheme. It is quite sad. That means you are left at the mercy of death. You are left at the mercy of whatever happens to you. Nobody cares. If you are dull, let the devil take you. And it is quite sad. That is not how society should be built. You can imagine, even up to today, as I said yesterday, there are no pharma, pharmaceutical shops that were opened. Someone was looking for where to buy drugs. You can hardly see. What kind of country is this? For 2 days, you have to shut all the pharmaceutical shops or stores or locations that nobody, if there is emergency, you are just on your own. I mean, who does that? How do we get to this place? Why can't we get a system that is running, a viable system? But the politicians, once there is the slightest headache or head challenge, they will just jet out of the country to assess the best state of the art facilities and medical scheme abroad with the same taxpayers' money. But they can't fix the same healthcare system in the same country with the taxpayers' money at their disposal. And the likes of Wole Soyinka remains silent and is not speaking up. It is quite sad, it is quite frustrating, quite disappointing that we have such elder statements who have expressed some level of uh, biasness in their positions on matters that borders on humanity and borders the existence of humanity. It is quite sad. And this, of course, have left us with much pain, of course, and dissatisfaction because why? With such systems, people really know who you are, where you stand. You don't need to hide. No matter how pretentious or how you might tend to pretend, people knows who you are. You can only deceive some few gullible ones, but they knew what you represent by your actions and words. It's quite sad. Yeah, Uche Jene, you're welcome. He is okay. Said he will criticize the government after 1 year. Just what you are saying. How can you criticize the government after 1 year? What difference does that make? What difference does your criticism make after 1 year? Is 1 year, is it the benchmark? Is it the threshold of determining a nation, a country, a government that will fail? From inception, you can see whether a government is on the right track of success, of succeeding or not. You don't need to wait for 1 year. That is mere deception. That is living in self-denial. That is high level of compromise. You already seen what is happening. You already seen how Nigeria dollar naira have lost virtually 90% of its value. You have seen inflations. You've seen the bombing of innocent citizens across the nations of the earth of the country. You've seen yesterday in Plateau about 115 people died. And you're not speaking up. You have to wait for 1 year before you react to all these things. Who is deceiving who? It is quite sad. It's quite unfortunate. Honestly, that means possibly to some greater extent there may not be hope for this country because no society can be built in the on with this level of acrimony, with this level of this dissension sentiments that is building up, and people who are expected to speak out, to speak up, to say the truth, unfortunately are disappointing themselves. You now assess somebody, a government that is already on the path of crashing, of collapsing economic wise. You are turning the whole country of the world, different countries of the world, to solicit for loans to service debts. And say, is that a sign of an economy that can survive? The economy is almost at the state of insolvency. It's only moribund. No factory, no company will survive on borrowing and without thinking how to, of course, generate resources. Look inwards and see with enormous resources available at your disposal how to create jobs, wealth, without creating wealth for the masses of this country. You can't get out of the woods, you can't get out of poverty because it's the small scale businesses that drives the economy. But when you neglect that, you suffocate them, you frustrate them. Most people have lost their jobs, and sometimes their shops have been cut down, destroyed without any due compensation, and you want them to start life afresh. And that has, of course, an overbearing impact, negative impact on their welfare and that of their families because they have families to cater for, direct family, immediate families, or, of course, extended families. And they will all suffer because of these economic mishaps and anti policies of the government. We don't need even a month is enough. 60 days is enough. 100 days is enough to tell whether this government will succeed or not if you are sincere enough. Waiting for the next 4 years can't make any difference. That amounts to sabotage. That amounts to hypocrisy. Yes, that amounts to hypocrisy. Because when you see what is wrong, you are trying to paint it, you are trying to make it, look acceptable. Come on. Who does that? Who are you deceiving? You can only deceive yourself and not the masses because people are more, of course, informed and they understand that the factors that could drive economy and when those factors are not brought, of course, to fall, you are just wasting time. You're just marking time and don't expect anything different, of course, from what is already, of course, playing out. That is quite sad. This is, of course, the year is winding up. What does the government have for the country? What are the economic blueprints? How do you want to achieve those policies and implementation? Of course, how do you monitor the implementation of those policies? And that is quite sad. There is none, of course, no institution of the state will want to give account or hold the government accountable to to such extent that the government will understand that they have an obligation and a duty to the masses of this country to account every kobo that is budgeted for any project or is a cushion of any project. Otherwise, we go nowhere as a people, and the incessant insecurity will continue to rock this country. You know, the fundamental factor responsible for insecurity is what? Poverty. Millions of the citizens of Nigeria are still impoverished. And when you have majority of your citizens that are impoverished, you're just building, of course, a time bomb. You're just building an army of suicide, an army of resistance, an army that will make life unbearable for you yourself and that of your families. Just a matter of time, just a time bomb buying time to explode. And when it does, then everybody will be in for it. Everybody will be calling for safety. It's high time we begin to address that, because if we fail to address those pertinent issues, those critical issues, and disaster is looming, of course, nobody will know, of course, where it will catch up with his or her life or that of his loved ones. Those who live in glass houses should not throw stone, because one day you might not know who where it will land, and definitely we must stand to reap what we have sown. When you have sown deception, inconsistency, and of course, biasness in your stance, of course, people will know, and people will evaluate you based on your, of course, inconsistency and dwindling. You can't continue to deceive everyone all the time. Of course, someday, somehow, people will get to know whom you are, what you represent, and how sincere and commitment you are. Of course, that is quite sad. These are issues we want to review this evening. To answer Professor Wole Soyinka, if you have maintained that it is madness to think Nigeria will work with this current system of governance, with this current system configuration, and you should, of course, believe in the world of fantasy, the world of oblivion, in the world where nothing works. It is quite sad and ridiculous to begin at this time when you needed to speak out and let people know your position. You went to keep, you decided to keep aloof, and of course, remain silent when you are expected to speak up. When you are expected as a state person, state man, to speak up, you decided to keep mute. Well, only posterity will judge all of us. And the reality is that we can't run away from that, whether we live in denial or not. But the realities will keep on staring at us. Have the Nigerian state been structured? Have there been decentralization of the police, of other instruments of the state? The answer is no. Now, why? Why the silence? Why not continue to call on the government, of course, to do the needful, to prioritize the well-being and the life of average Nigerians? Should be, of course, the primary essence of governance, but that has been defeated. The primary essence of governance now is to enrich themselves and to make themselves more powerful, more weightier than the state itself. And with that, they could, of course, intimidate and suppress anybody they feel, of course, is standing against their way, or a perceived enemy or opponent who may want to challenge, of course, them, and dislodge them from the position of power. Because absolute power, of course, they say corrupt absolutely. We have seen that expressed in most recent time in Nigeria. But that is quite sad. Any country that has no regard for rule of law is a dead country. But just a matter of time, of course, would collapse. And when it happens, no person can save them from this imminent uh, devastation, destruction that is awaiting such a society. Yes, where young ones and have been turned to yahoos. You see, obtaining by fraud and deceit, and most parents are encouraging them as the new way of life. But you don't back and tell that whatever you get through your dubious means, you also, of course, pay back in due course. Just that sometimes it might be delayed and we may not. And of course, people who strive in evil will, of course, seems to not to have been polished when it is right or due, better and a calculation. But the reality is that one day, whatever they have done will catch up with them, including the political class and those within the governance of this country. Well, my own candid submission is that Wole Soyinka, with due respect, will, of course, rise up and stop being, of course, uh, in fence. You must come down in either side, and that is a choice you must make. Let us know what you stands for, what you represents, rather than deceiving the people and trying to appear that you are innocent or you in any way condemn such level of rascality when you can't speak out, when you can't call the attention of the president on issues or matters of great concern. Then what are you looking at? What precedents are you setting for the younger generations? And will you want them to toe the same path of inconsistency? And that would be very unfortunate, honestly, for everyone. Yes, as someone said that the people you fail to turn today, you impoverish today, will one day stand to demand for their rights. And when that happens, of course, it will dislodge everything you represent, and nobody will have any place to hide. On this note, I want to wrap it up until I come your way in the next editions. But I leave you with this thought. I do believe that this country will continue in this way, and of course, expects a different result. Well, I leave that with you, of course, to comment and they think that, of course, the future of this country lies in the commitments of her leader or leadership as it stands today. When the leader has failed, of course, the integrity test below the threshold of what is acceptable, what can the righteous do? What can those who still believe in true democratic process, what can they do? Unfortunately, now most of them have been silenced, only buying time. But one day, of course, those issues must be ironed out and trashed. And nobody knows the day, how long that will remain. But the reality is that Nigerians are suffering and telling us that it is mad to think Nigeria will work well and you still keep mute, you still keep quiet when you needed to speak out. Let them hear, let the heaven and earth hear your voice that you have spoken out. You decided to keep quiet until 1 year. I mean, you've not seen the level of poverty, pain, frustration, depression Nigerians are going through. So you needed 1 year to call the attentions of the president over nagging issues, over issues of concern. That is quite unfortunate and the sight of insensitivity on the part of the Professor Wole Soyinka. This is interesting. And on this note, I wish you the best of the uh, Yuletide. And as we wind up the year 2023, we hope that better days is ahead of us, but we must not fail to understand that principles, life is all about principles. When you don't sow, you don't reap. When you don't plan, of course, for the future, you may not have anything called future. And these are what Nigerians stands, of course, is at this time. We're just at the crossroad, whether Nigeria will work or not. But the reality is that much negative impact has been impacted on the well-being of and psyche of an average Nigerian, of course, masses. And what they are now looking for is how to survive. It's a battle of survival and nothing more. And this is quite unfortunate. Most of what we call prayer points shouldn't be a prayer point, something we have to worry about if the system is working. But that is the sad reality. On this note, wishing you all the best. And of course, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night from here. I will see you, God willing, tomorrow morning. We continue this in depth analysis. What we are to discuss tomorrow is that I will destroy Nigeria with the truth. That is the position of Mazen and the plan. We're going to review how, of course, that statement and the state of affairs of this country. Is it a reality of our time today? Of course, I am looking forward to having you in subsequent. To, of course, propagate nothing but the truth until, of course, it sinks in the heart of every politicians that what we are standing for is for humanity and nothing more. As Core Wave TV is dedicated, of course, and to do this, we are, of course, a television station that is very informative and entertaining, of course, designed to express the unbiased realities in our unique system and, of course, the world at large. That is what we represent to analyze and digest issues of importance. It's not issues, of course, of less importance. The issues about life, about economic security, is issue of great importance. And any government that does not take it serious, that politicizes it, is bound to collapse. Just a matter of time. And our citizens will always suffer. But we don't need such suffering again. We don't need anybody to tell us to fasten our bed, to tighten our bed, that 2024 we have to tighten our bed. But those tightening of bed, in fact, most of the beds of Nigerians has even been fixed, have even eaten deep into their bones. So no government should come and tell us to pay sacrifice, that you need to pay sacrifice while you are busy flying across the nations of the earth, of course, and you are being paid for travel allowances running into billions, and you want Nigerians to, of course, a side patient. What patience is that? A side patient, and what are your plans for them? If it is zero, then just don't bother asking us to exercise patience because we have been living in this patience and depression, and most Nigerians are tired of all the stories. But until I come your way, of course, in the next edition, remain blessed. Have a fantastic moment with your loved ones and family. Bye for now. Of course, I remain Chico Zendimbo, the host anchor, wishing you all the best of the season. Bye and remain blessed. Thank you for watching. And of course, kindly hit the like buttons and subscribe. And of course, you are good to go. And turn on the notification buttons whenever we online or upload any video. You could easily access it and join this wonderful and entertaining moment here in Call Wave TV. Remember, bless and God bless you. Bye.